I don't know if I'll get up today. I don't know if I'll give one single today. My whole outlook is sunken gray, and I have no idea why I woke up this way. Got my phone in my right hand, my books on the nightstand. If I unlock and I app pop, I'm stuck there, I'm a dead man. So Lord, give me the strength to please read one page. If it works in any way, I'll move on to the next thing, oh dim. I got my socks on, I'm coming up.
Welcome to Positively Undefeated. This is a podcast that talks about the day-to-day struggle ordinary people have over their demons and how each day they remain positively undefeated. We share ideas and ways that you can empower yourself to remain strong so that you can embrace the journey of living.
Thank you guys for tuning in to Positively Undefeated. If you guys haven't had a chance, check out our website, which is evenoneless.com. That will give you kind of how to contact us. It'll tell you more about our not-for-profit. So if you get a chance, check it out. Also, go to your favorite podcasting application, whether Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, any of those. We're on those, and just like and review and all that. So, Emily, I am so glad to have you on. Emily Elgin. I was thinking about how I originally got in contact with you or through TikTok, and I think either I used your music for one of my videos, or you asked me to use one of your music for one of my videos. I think that's how it started.
Yes, do what?
You live in Nashville?
I do. I've been here. Actually, May 1st will be 9 years since I moved here. So,
where are you
it's
originally?
crazy. Oklahoma.
Are you really? You mean,
Yeah.
you know that's where I live, right? I live in
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I looked up, when you reached out to me about being on the podcast, I kind of did a deep dive and looked into the foundation that you guys started and all of those things, and realized that y'all were from Oklahoma too. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, we're in Oklahoma.
I was born in Norman, but I've lived from everywhere from Lexington to Edmond. I've just lived all around. I moved around a lot.
My wife, she's born in Norman as well. So I'm sure you saw it, but we're in western Oklahoma, right off I-40. So halfway in between Amarillo and Oklahoma City. So
yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm really curious about your music. So, I from what I understand, like there's two ways to go about, like as an artist. One, that you can get a record deal, and if you're able to find a record deal and then the other way would be more independent, where you kind of put out your own music. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And which way are you trying? It looks like you're trying to do more independent.
Yeah, that is correct. There's, with the era of digital streaming and the internet, it's just really changed the game as far as what artists are capable of doing. So there are several different ways, and I feel like everybody wants to know, well, what's the way? And there's not really a way to go about it. I am independent right now. That's not to say that I wouldn't sign a major label deal, but it would have to be the right deal for me to sign. I'm really happy with being independent, although I will say being independent is much more difficult in a lot of areas because I'm a one-woman team currently. Yeah. Fingers crossed that this is where I get representation with like an agent or management, but I'm currently doing the job of 7 different people. So it's a lot on the day-to-day.
How has that, like the move to, of course you lived there for a while now, but the move to Nashville, I'm just curious, like, as somebody trying to get their music out there and so, and I've watched your TikToks, and I know it must be difficult to like get your stuff out there and get people to notice it. I'm just curious what that journey's been like for you, like all the moving and just being there in Nashville and all that.
It's really been an incredible journey. I moved here in 2015. And yes, I moved here for music, but I also moved here for a life change. I had been getting into a bunch of trouble back home, and I'd been arrested and been to jail and just really living a lifestyle that I was really unhappy with. and my life sucked. I'd go out and party and everybody would see me happy and drinking and partying, but I wasn't happy at all. I was very unhappy. And, so, my reason for my move to Nashville was twofold. And yes, this has been one of the absolute hardest things I've ever done in my entire life, deciding to go into the music business, learn the business, own and run my own company, and do all of the things that is required by that path. But my worst day doing this is still better than where I was. So I think that has really helped me along my journey. Is when I do look back, I can see how far I've come, and I know where I would have been if I would have stayed.
Yeah. I see, you talk a lot about domestic violence and, and as I was watching some of your videos, I was just, I was thinking about that. In fact, one of your videos, you talk about the fact that it's easy to think that from the outside that, like, basically you, as you say, you pick the wrong men, but
Yeah.
like you describe, and you did well in that video, just talking about the fact that, for a while, there's no hint of that stuff. There's no, there might be some red flags, but nothing to that extent. And I'm curious, that's definitely kind of a platform that you talk about and write songs about too. And so I'm just curious, is kind of your experience with that. And then, there might be people listening that are just, kind of silently suffering, in their own situation. I would just like to know kind of your situation, and then how you kind of got out of that and out of that mentality of, in other words, putting up with it. Cause you talk about as a kid that you had the same thing. And then as an adult, we hear that a lot, that we're going to struggle with the same thing our parents struggle. And that it seems like we say we're never going to be like our parents, but then we turn around and have some similar situation.
Yeah. For me, I think domestic violence is such a multidimensional and complicated issue. It's not just, like I said in my video, it's not just as simple as, oh, well, she has bad taste in men. It's not. It's a very broad generalization for people to put on it, that either domestic violence, they don't understand it, or it makes them uncomfortable. So for me, I was raised in a home with domestic violence. And like I said in my video, not by my biological father. My daddy is amazing. We love him. But when my parents divorced, my mama remarried a couple of times, and her husbands were all very violent. And so when you grow up in a household like that, it really warps what you learn love is, because love is something that's taught to you by your parents, and you internalize that. And as an adult, those qualities are something that you're drawn to, whether you know it or not. And so as I became a young woman, I was very confused. Although I didn't know I was confused, I thought I knew it all. And I thought I knew exactly what I wanted out of a man and out of a relationship and a potential partner for life. And the men that I was drawn to were all very violent. And, but like I said, it didn't start that way, and whenever you have someone that hurts you physically and then apologizes for it, the physical aspect is not the hard part. Getting hit is not the worst part. It's what it does to you here and here. And it really warps your understanding of what love is, understanding of love for oneself, and your own self-confidence and trust, not only in other people, but within yourself. Mm-hmm. And so the last abusive relationship I was in, I made a decision to not date anymore. Nothing serious. I would, hang out and stuff, but I wouldn't ever take that next step to be in a relationship. And I started going to therapy. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge advocate now for therapy, because it has genuinely changed my life for the better. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely, I would say that one of the number one reasons that I was able to really shift my mindset and work through traumas from childhood, young adulthood, really start to understand why things happen the way they happened and what love is, what genuine partnership is rather than, obsession and unhealthy personal and interpersonal boundaries.
Yeah. I know it's like whenever I was really going through stuff, I like it for me, I like found ways to cope. And then I found out later that really those ways were not very healthy. And then,
Yeah.
felt like going extreme, like, where I did that. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like called 75 hard. It's where you work out twice a day, all this stuff. Andy
Yes.
it's his Proform. It's his company, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. Anyway, but I did that and I felt great, but then whenever it was over, it was almost like this hangover. It's like I didn't, you think you would naturally like go to this place where like, okay, well, I'm going to just work out one time a day, but I'm still going to work out. And then it just felt like this, I accomplished it, but it wasn't, working out a ton every single day and doing all these things was a little bit of an overkill. And then you take like, I struggled with, coping with alcohol and like, of course, drinking too much, and then realizing that this wasn't good, those different things. What kind of stuff did you feel like that you kind of went through that same thing where it's like, I'm picking maybe the extreme of the other side?
I definitely did a bunch of drugs and drank a lot. I mean, I really like pain pills, so I would pop a pain pill before I would go out drinking with my friends, and I would rationalize it in my head as I'm saving money on beer because I just took this pill so I don't have to drink as much beer,
Yeah.
Um, and then eventually I started doing a bunch of cocaine and binge drinking, and everything just kept, had to go one notch higher, one notch higher, one notch higher.
Yeah.
And when I was still living in Oklahoma City, I was drinking so bad, so heavy. It had just gotten really out of control. And it's all under this, bright, shiny light of we're just partying, we're just having fun. But it got to a point that I was losing control. And I had met this guy at a bar and went back to his apartment with him. And he had what he told me was a hydrocodone. And it ended up being Suboxone, and I snorted it. And I was really, really drunk when I snorted it. And that led me to continuing to do that. And at one point, it had got so bad that I woke up after a night of doing that, and I was vomiting in my sleep. And thank God I woke up because I would have died. And I woke up vomiting and I went to the bathroom and I was at somebody else's house. And I just got this overwhelming sense of fear. Like I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home. So I got in my car and I was driving, and I was over off of like 36th and Penn, north side by Penn Square Mall in Oklahoma City. And my house was just a few miles from there. And I was driving. I could not stay conscious. I would kind of pass out and then come to, and I was vomiting all at the same time, trying to drive home. And after I recovered from that, I was laying in bed and I thought, this is how your dad is going to find you. If you keep this up, this is what's going to happen. There is, where the road leads. It leads the same place for everybody eventually, one way or another. And that's when I started to seriously consider moving and really trying to give myself a chance to be who I was created to be. Because I just felt, obviously that I wasn't doing that, but I definitely used a lot of coping mechanisms. I actually, during that time, I started going to AA meetings.
Yeah.
But when I was there, I realized I wasn't an alcoholic because I didn't have the of I couldn't relate to anything that these people were saying.
Right.
And therapy, I realized that I was self-medicating by using these substances. And my entire life, because I come from, on my mother's side, there's a lot of alcoholism and drug use and all sorts of stuff. And so I was told from a young age, well, you're genetically predisposed. You're just going to be an alcoholic. So sorry, that's just your life, you know? And now as an adult, I fight that entire just agenda so hard with people, because just because your parents were something, that does not define you. It does not at all.
So, I mean, that's a pretty big move to Nashville, like from Oklahoma. Did you have connections there, or is it like cold turkey moved to Nashville?
Oh, it's a weird story, but no, I didn't know anybody. I had one friend that lived in Nashville, but I moved to Leapers Fork, Tennessee, which is about 40 minutes south of Nashville.
Okay.
And I had been looking online because I had a horse at the time. I trained horses and stuff, and I wanted to bring her with me. And I found a apartment that was owned by a man that ran a ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, he ended up being a preacher, and he ran a big 500-acre ranch in Leapers Fork, Tennessee. And there was a live-in quarters barn that was available, and he was needing somebody to ride colts for him. So I'd never met him. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know what the place looked like. It was a Craigslist ad. And so I talked to him. It was on the phone, and he said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I'm a bartender." He said, "You drink and party?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, you're going to have to limit that here on this ranch." And he said, "Can you do that?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "All right, well, come on." And I didn't have any money at all. I mean, I was broke. And I was laying in bed one night, and I was praying, and I said, "God, where you lead, I will follow."
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, at this bar that I was working at, a man comes in, he buys a Bud Light for $3 and hands me a $100 bill and told me to keep it. Well, that pissed me off because I thought he was like, trying to proposition me and just hit on, and be gross. Mm-hmm. So I said something rude to him, and he said, no, Emily, you and I have a mutual friend. I've heard that you want to move to Nashville and sing. I want to help you. Will you meet me for breakfast at this breakfast spot? So I said, yes. And so I met him the next day, and he gave me $4,000 cash, and I moved to 3 weeks later.
That's pretty incredible. And I don't think there's any coincidence in that whatsoever. So do you still live on the same ranch, and are you still there, or did you transition to something else?
I transitioned, and I will say that was probably the hardest transition since I've been here. I lived there for 6 years, and the property was actually for sale the entire time. And so somebody came in and bought it. And so I had to move, and I was not happy about it. It was very difficult for me to move, because that was the first place that I had felt that was home since I was a very little girl. I mean, little, that was my first home, and that felt like home, and I felt safe there. And it was just a beautiful, heavenly property that, I mean, there's no way that I could have landed there by any orchestration of human hands. It's just not possible.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That's one thing you and I have in common, that, I love horses. We've done in the past a lot of trail riding and, stuff like that. And in fact, I rode yesterday for quite a while. And I find that, like, first of all, I think a lot of horse people are crazy. That's not saying you, but I'm saying in general, I see a lot of crazy horse. I kind of grew up, and, my family was poor. And so, riding horses was like, we didn't have any of the fancy stuff. You see a fancy trailer and fancy, and so even as an adult, where maybe I have more stuff, but I still really manage the horses a lot like I did whenever I was younger, like we did, which more of the poor environment kind of deal. But meaning that I don't have a fancy trailer. I don't have those things, but I really enjoy doing it. And do you still have horses now?
I do. I do. And you don't have to have all of the fancy smancy stuff to enjoy it. It's funny because the evolution of the horse is so wild because it used to be a necessity and now it's, like a rich man's sport, which is really funny to me. But yes, I do. I had a quarter horse mare that I raised from a foal and trained her, and she was wonderful. But unfortunately, she sustained an accident 2 years ago that I had to put her down, and I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
And then I had an old quarter horse as well, and he passed away about 6 months after her. So I waited for a while because I get very attached to my animals. I'm very much an animal person. But I just bought a 8-year-old paint gelding about a month ago named Kingston, and I love him. He's so cute.
I saw the video on that, I believe. Now, is he a stud or a gelding?
Do what?
Is he a stud or a gelding?
No, he's a gelding. He might think he's a stud, but he's not.
Like a horse. It's hard to pick the right horse. It really is. It's hard to make sure that I just bought a horse recently and came from New Mexico. It's so I've never seen anything like it. So I've had up to like 12 horses, but right now we have 3. And we're kind of trying to build it back up, and because we just bought some land and but this horse, I have this little miniature horse, and he's a stud. And I got him from our grandbaby. Just thought it was cool. Well, I got this new horse, and this miniature horse literally would not let this new horse eat, would not let it drink, ran it, and this new horse is probably 16 hands tall. I mean, big horse, and ran him all over the pasture, just, I mean, nonstop. And so I ended up moving him out to the land. We have like 5 acres where we live. And then, we have this land. And so I moved him out there because he'd gotten so skinny, but I'd never seen a little miniature horse be so abusive to this new horse. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a little bit of both of them, like this new horse's personality is like, in the herd horse mentality, he's definitely at the bottom. And it's like, wow, and again, this little miniature horse just kind of controlled his whole life for like 2 weeks until I moved him. It was pretty wild. I'd never seen it. Well,
That's so funny.
I grew up like, you go out and you put out feed, and if they don't come, then they don't get to eat. Kind of, that's the mentality. Yeah. And so, but this horse, almost from the start, I'd have to go and feed him separately and go. And I was like, oh my God. And this is really driven by his personality, but also this miniature horse. So it's so funny. I mean, but he's great. I like ride him, and he's, you never know when you get a horse out on, for a while, how they'll act. And he acted great. And so riding wise, he's fine. It's just this whole, he's the bottom of the herd. So.
It is really interesting. When I was training full time, I gave riding lessons too. And I had a program, and I would have clients that, and this happens very frequently, is you get people who grew up riding, and they rode just backyard horses from the age of, 8 to 10 or something like that. And then they're now in their 30s and 40s and they want to get a horse, which I completely support. Yes, let's do that. But they go out and they go to kill pens and they go to, Craigslist or wherever, and they buy a horse and that is not the right fit for them. Not that it's a bad horse. The experience levels just don't line up. And then they get themselves in such a mess, and it happens all the time. But fortunately, I mean, people like that keep trainers in business. So it's a good thing. And if you get a good trainer, you'll be able to help them, either get the horse where they need to be or find a horse that's going to be better suited for them.
Yeah, I always remind people, it's like, you do realize a horse killed Superman, right? Because, you think about Christopher Reeves, he got hurt. And I always give that example, but, because it's like you see these, especially on TikTok or whatever, you see these videos of this guy getting on a horse and bucking around. And of course it gets, 100,000 views or whatever. But I'm like, nobody in their right mind is going to go get on some horse knowing it's going to do that. I think that may be a young man's game when you were young, but I'm like, you're going to get hurt if you're not careful.
It is. And it's also a thing that I've noticed within Western culture of it proves how tough you are and it proves how cowboy or cowgirl you are. And I will say from firsthand experience, I was definitely that rider when I was in my early 20s. I would get on anything. I had built up a clientele and I dealt with a lot of problem horses. And I would get on horses that I had no business getting on, that were very dangerous. And it would just feed my ego because people would be like, oh, Emily, you can put her on that horse. She ain't coming off, da, 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 da. And fast forward to a call that I got one time, and I had already been riding all day, and somebody called me and they said, hey, we've got a horse out here. I think it was in Lexington or someplace, maybe east of Lexington. And it was this big gray quarter horse mare. And he said, I said, what's going on with her? And he said, oh, well, she's just, won't go through her gates, and she's just kind of being fickle and, attitudey, and my grandkids can't ride her. I want my grandkids to ride her. And I said, all right, well, I'll come out. Long story short, she bucked me off. And what happened was this man did not disclose everything about the mare. She had actually bucked off another cowboy a week prior to me, and he had to get shoulder surgery. But I felt myself coming up out of the saddle when she was bucking. So I set my shoulders back. But when I did, she had come up and twisted. So I landed on the saddle horn, which compressed my spine. So during that, I broke my tailbone, and I also got a compression fracture, and I blacked out when that happened. And then the next thing I remember is hitting the ground somehow, but I'm pretty sure I hit like this because it broke both of my wrists. And then I remember hearing this weird noise, and I looked down and my legs were kind of like flopping on the ground. And then I looked at my arms and they were kind of flopping on the ground. And then I realized that noise was me screaming. And that's when the pain hit. And I threw up and I've never felt any kind of pain. I can't even put it into words how bad it was. But I advocate for young trainers now to just be really smart about the types of horses that they're getting on, and don't buy into the, this is what makes you cool thing. If you're gonna ride broncs, do it 100%, but go to the professional that rides broncs and learn the technique. There's techniques. There's reasons why people do this professionally. You know what I mean? I've got some trainers out here that are phenomenal, but they do it professionally. And I wish that I would have listened. And even after that, in 2018, I had a horse flip over on me twice. And I had a horse in 2017 fall on top of me. So, I got out of horse training and said, we're going to do music full time.
I got thrown like 2 or 3 years ago, and the horse, it was like a brand new horse. I took it out riding. It was supposed to be all this. Anyway, got thrown, and that horse ran back to the entrance. And, we're talking about like a mile. I was like a mile. And so I had to walk back, and I'm like, this is horrible. I hated it. So I'm curious, back to the music thing. So I actually, I've kind of have a little bit involvement in the past with, different artists and whatever, let's say local, we call them red dirt bands, those kind of things, yeah. And so, in fact, at at the ranch, we had a concert a few years ago, and we had like, I think 16 bands. And so,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, again, it was a small kind of deal, meaning that really probably 200 people came. It wasn't, huge. And they were all new artists or people trying. But one thing that I just always amazed me, and I had several friends that are, are into music, and, I'm curious, like, so my friend and I were talking about, like, unfortunately, when it comes to, like, let's say singing, I think a lot of people, they get the idea whether they sing well or not, probably from, other people. They say, "Oh my God, you sing so beautifully," and whatever. And then yet, if you take some of the most popular artists, let's say like Tyler Childers or whoever, and you notice that they have a very unique sound, you know? So somebody like me, I would tell you, I can't sing, I would say that. But also sometimes I wonder if maybe it's because in my mind, I'm singing like I've heard other people sing, like a karaoke or, whatever. In other words, if I'm listening to a song on the radio driving in my truck and I'm singing along with that song, well, obviously I'm mimicking what I'm hearing, right? And maybe that song's not really even made for a voice like mine or whatever. And yet I could see how somebody who really has talent could get very discouraged or frustrated because if they're listening to the outside world tell them whether they can sing or not, yet they have this very unique, I mean, take somebody like Amy Winehouse or, you have these artists who have this very unique sound. And I think that easily somebody who's professional or somebody who's just in that they know could, really discourage them because they sing differently. And I think that singing differently is really what makes that artist unique. And does that make sense? And yet also, man, I went to Nashville 2 years ago, and that's the first time I'd ever been to Nashville. Right. And so I go and we went to concerts and we went to, of course, the bars and listened to, and I was just blown away by the talent there.
Oh, yeah.
It's everywhere. It's every,
It
and,
is.
and part of it is like, and again, I'm not a musician, so I'm just telling you from a non-musician person that I see they have talent, but also you start to realize it's like, man, they do sound just like the next person in some ways. They're not really that unique. And I can see how that'd be very difficult, discouraging because I think here's another way to put it. If I found like who I was and my voice and I was able to project it, just mine, not copying anybody else, I wonder how that would be. And yet I see like somebody like you, I could see that could be very difficult. So I just want your take on that.
Well, I think that's a several part thing. Number one, talent is such a deep well. And for some people, a good singer in their mind has to sound like Whitney Houston or, any of these iconic, very big, strong, powerful, belty voices. Whereas other people love voices like Taylor Swift, right? And she's got a very airy, light, floaty voice. Very different voices, arguably still the same amount of talent, just in different areas of the talent well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it can be very discouraging. When I came out here, I had the opportunity to go to an A-list party, and I'm from Oklahoma. I've never been anywhere hardly, and I get invited to this like A-list artist birthday party just by being at the right place at the right time. And while I was there with a friend of mine, he introduced me to this artist's publicist. And I, in my head, was like, this is it. This is my big break. Oh my gosh. So Man turns around. My friend introduces me to this man. He says, "Hey, this is Emily Elgin. She's a new artist in town. She's a fantastic singer." And I said, "Hi, I'm so excited to meet you." And he looks at me and he said, "That's nice," and turned around and
Oh,
kept
wow.
talking.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
awesome." So, and those types of things happen. Was that rude of him? He could have handled it differently. Yes. I don't think I would have treated somebody that way. But also in that moment, yes, it hurt my feelings. Yes, I cried about it later. But it also lit a fire in me in the sense of I don't ever want to just be something that fades into the background.
Yeah.
And when people start feeling discouraged and they start trying to chase these sounds, they start trying to chase trends. Trends fade just like style. All of that fades. What doesn't fade is your individuality. You are at this point in time in history, the only one of you that exists and that will ever exist. So there lies your creative power. You are the only one that can write songs the way you write songs. If you're not a good songwriter, start learning how to write songs. If you think you are a really good songwriter, keep working with people that are better than you. Keep perfecting, and eventually somebody is going to appreciate what you're doing. Now, it might not be the whole big wide world, but you will find your audience.
No. It's funny because I like you. I'm sure Sturgill Simpson. I'm sure you've listened to him. But you hear stories of like I heard that he like basically he's now just kind of reclused on his own little. He's not making any music anymore. That's what I've heard, and so I see that like you have the very unique artists, and it's like almost like they get tired of the public. They get tired of the drama, or they get tired of something, and they're like, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm out, and I just have to assume that that's from like just the pressure of just everything sometimes.
Yeah, the music industry, and I mean the entire entertainment industry, this falls under, but the music industry specifically, I don't think anyone is ever prepared for what comes with notoriety on any level. And when you start getting into fame, the things that come with that, there are a lot of things that come with that are amazing. It opens doors for you that you weren't able to walk through before. Of course, financially, you're set up financially in a lot of ways that you weren't before, but there are a lot of things that come with that are negative and depressing and scary. And the internet in general is really mean. I mean, the things that people have said about me on the internet, on my posts, just tearing me down, my lyrics or my melodies or the way I look or my hair color, or calling me every name you could think of. And that's also a very easy thing for people to be like, oh, we'll just ignore the comments. And you do, but you still see them. And sometimes they still stick with you, especially when you are putting everything that you have into this. You literally created something. It did not exist before you.
Yeah.
And you put your love and your time and your energy and your hopes and your dreams into this thing. And then you put it out into the world to share with them, and they tear it down. It can be extremely painful. Yeah. Or, just the fact that, internet stalkers, they're scary. Ugh. Just, there's a lot of weird stuff that comes with that. But for me, I've adopted.
Me reaching out to you to do this. It's like, I know how that is, because like, same thing with me, which I'm, I don't do music and all that stuff. But the point is that, I get it. I get weird messages, I was doing a live one time. This is right after, our big platform is, suicide prevention, and I had 3 family members commit suicide. And so like right after his death, which part of the reason I have so many followers is because I would post videos about that and the ranch and whatever. But I just got the most horrible, um, you know, comments during that time. And then at one point, people thought I was doing a live. I think I was one of the few people who's ever done it, and I'm going to continue doing it, of which I would do live riding horseback. And I did it
Yeah.
like, for an hour at a time, I just riding, and people loved it.
Yeah.
But also, like this one particular time, somebody thought that I was actually my dead cousin. It was the weirdest. And so they're making and I didn't have a moderator. So it was insane. And and I'm like, sometimes I get discouraged with it. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then also, watching, one thing I really respect about you is that, I don't have to watch very many videos of yours to know kind of what you're doing and what you're trying to do. And, I respect it. I respect your music and I respect what you're trying to do. But, sometimes it's all about, for some people, it's all, of course, all about the likes and all about, and it's really, I mean, watch, TikTok live and you'll be like, oh my gosh, what is going on around here? Finding your place is difficult in the social media world for sure.
I think that it is difficult, but it's also, I feel like we put too much thought into it. If you just, and I know this is so cliche, but if you just be who you are, look at other people that you admire, and like if you're struggling with something and you don't know how to make a specific type of video or whatever it is, there are so many resources now that allow for you to learn how to do that. But if you just continue to be who you are, you will build an audience around that. And I think for me personally, one of the biggest things that I've struggled with is comparison. I'll look at their other artists and they have more followers than me, because at the end of the day with music, our numbers really count. Yeah. And when you work so hard and then your numbers aren't where you want them, or you have somebody creating fake accounts, like people make fake accounts and then people that would have followed me follow them and they're sealing, numbers, it's just this whole thing. But it's, if you can get to a point where you stop comparing yourself to others, there's really a peace with that. That's nice that you just kind of settle into, because
I think that comes
I've had
for sure.
Say that again.
I said, I think that comes with some maturity, as we mature and grow and all that. So, how would you describe your growth moment currently? Like, I'll give you mine real quick. Like, let's say something upsets me or bothers me. Like, it maybe in the past I might stew on it for 2 weeks or something, and now I think my growth moment at this moment is like, I'm quicker to recognize that something's going on. And then like, I kind of try to deal with it immediately or as soon as possible, so I don't stay in that headspace for 2 weeks. And it could be, I mean, it could be all across the board, but I always say, like, my mind goes to a 10, and before I might stay at that 10 for a while, just mentally. And then now I've started to recognize that. And then I try to figure out what's going on in my head and why I'm at a 10 and try to deal with it. I'm curious what your growth moment currently is.
Currently, I feel like ours is slightly similar, because I used to go from 1 to 10 real quick. I'd get, something would upset me and I would react solely off of emotion. And now with my job, with what I do for a living, it is so important to have a good handle on your mental health. Because if you think about it, I mean, all of the people within the music business that have died young from overdoses and all of these things, or suicide or whatever it was, within the music industry, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that's glorified. You want to be a rock star, but that's not sustainable, and it will lead to the deterioration of your life really quickly. So now if I get really stressed, recognizing, old patterns and old behavioral or old thought patterns and behavioral patterns and saying, okay, that's not what I don't cope that way. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do instead. And really just implementing, healthy coping systems and support systems, I think is just something that I continue to do. And also, being more communicative, just really talking through things versus keeping it all kind of bottled up inside. If something hurts my feelings, I'm going to tell you, but we're not going to get in a fight about it. We're just going to talk about it because there's no reason to get worked up.
What's your, I know this is kind of a cliche question, but I'm always very curious to what people are listening to, like right now. Like what kind of music, or what, is there an artist or a song or something that that you're listening to right now?
Well, my playlist yesterday, I think I was listening to the Steel Drivers. Yeah. The Steel Drivers, Taylor Swift, the Red Clay Strays, and Lee Brice yesterday. So I'm kind of all over the board. I've been diving into the Taylor Swift album because she just, she's a world phenomenon right now, and her artistry and her everything that she's doing is so well thought out. It's phenomenal. So I'm a really big fan of the business structure. I love that. I think it's genius. And for her being a woman in the music industry doing what she's doing is just incredible. But I'm a huge fan of the Red Clay Strays. Do you know who they are?
I don't. Red Clay.
Okay.
We'll write that down.
Yeah. Look them up. The Red Clay Strays. So they are just moving and shaking right now. And they just signed a major label deal. They were independent for a long time. And I actually saw them twice in Nashville and hung out with them once for a short period of time before they got really big. And they were the nicest guys, so humble, so talented. But when they got on stage, it was just holy freaking crap. One of those bands, like as soon as I saw them, I was like, these guys they're going to hit it, because they were just phenomenal. So you should definitely look into them. They're great.
I'm going to. So I want to make sure that, I don't take up too much of your time, but I want to get in a couple of things. One is that I'm going to ask a favor, and you can't even answer yes or no, and I don't expect you to, but we're doing a tour of, kind of a tour of cities when it comes to our board members for our Even One Less. And so we're having these mixer events where we go and we have music, and we have like a live auction, and it's not so much to raise money. It's more of like just getting the message out there. And so we've started here in Elk City, Oklahoma, and then we went to Midland, Texas, and next we're going to Ardmore. But we're going to end, and it would be like a year from now. So that's why I don't even expect you to commit to it. But, meaning that when I have a better date, and, but I'm assuming like a year from now, we're going to go to Nashville. We're ending in Nashville. And
that's awesome.
I want to connect you with a friend of mine that he's a little bit older than I am, but his name is Donnie Lyles. His son is Stephen Lyles, which is with Love and Theft. And so, and he has really been a part of like the concert that I told you about. He just a super great guy, and he lives in Nashville. And so we're really going there for him, because he lives there. And so I would love to have you when we have that event. I would love to have you there and play some music for us. And I don't know, that's a year from now.
Yeah, honestly, I would love that. And you have my email. So just, holler at me once you guys get the details and everything. And if I'm in town, I'm always open to doing stuff like that.
How open are you to singing like one line or two lines of your newest song that you just dropped?
Should Have Been Raining or my new song that's out on Friday?
You pick. Because I know you released one on the 26th. So I mean that or a new one that you're going to put out. The 26th, that one comes out. That's the one we're talking about. That one comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, that one comes out Friday. I'm really excited about
Let's
that
put
one.
you on
That
the
one,
spot.
I'm keeping that one under wraps until
Okay.
we release it.
Okay.
But I can grab my guitar. I don't mind.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
I thought it'd be cool if you don't mind.
I don't mind. Let me grab my guitar.
Okay. And just remember, we're doing mainly audio, not video.
All right. Now I got to tune it because I have not played today. So I don't know where she's at, where she's sounding.
So the best way, so you're on Spotify. So if people want to find you there while you're doing that, Emily Elgin, that if they do that on Spotify, if they search that, they're going to be able to find you on Spotify, right?
Spotify. I'm on all of the streaming platforms. So anywhere you stream music, you can find me. Anywhere from
Apple,
YouTube to
all of-
Apple, Spotify,
Okay.
all of the things.
You guys listening, you really need to check out this girl. I was like super impressed. I don't know how, I think I've been following you for maybe a couple of years now, and I great music. Check it out. She definitely has a big platform as well on TikTok. So
We're almost there.
no pressure.
Yeah, it's so weird being an artist nowadays. It is very hard, but it's also, we live in such an exciting time as an independent artist because you have so much opportunity to push your music. And so that's one thing that I always try to encourage younger artists when they get discouraged of like, oh, well, it's so hard and this and that. And I'm not saying that it's not, but also don't lose sight of the incredible opportunity that you have right now that didn't exist 30 years ago.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard this song. If you haven't, maybe go back later and listen to it. It's called The Ride by David Allan Cole. And
Yes.
so one of the things he talked, kind of a lyric in there or whatever, he talks about basically, can you make people feel? And for me, when I think about like, listening to your stuff and, my favorite music, it's like the stuff that makes me feel, I think is super impactful. And what's funny is that, just like everything in life, like music is definitely, it's about the situation, the place you're at in life. So if you're going through a breakup, then you're going to be listening to more breakup songs. And if you're in love, you're going to listen to more love songs. But I think that the one thing those things have in common is that they make you feel,
They do.
and the cool thing about it, you can have like a definite like party song and it's the same thing though. It makes you feel and you're excited. And I mean, how many times have like you heard people like in the shower talking about, singing this song or some song stuck in your head. And I think that your music really does make you feel. And, but that's where, when I think about that, I think about that David Allan Cole song because, that's really what, and it's the story about him going to Nashville or whatever, the guy going to Nashville. And so anyway, I'll let you go.
It's very interesting. I think that emotion, if you don't have if your song holds no emotion, it's just, what is it? It's not a song. It's got to have some got to be able to evoke emotion of some sort. So I think that I love that. And I think that that's really, really important. And I mean, anything that's created is created, with emotion. So I think every song holds it. It's just if it's kind of your vibe or not,
Well, like I said, we talked about it's in your place. If you're in that place, if you listen to a breakup song, you're not breaking up with anybody, then it probably doesn't have as much impact
100%.
as,
100%.
love or whatever. So,
I went through a breakup when I was in my early 20s, and the Rascal Flatts CD, What Hurts the Most, I wore that thing out. It got me through that breakup. I'll never forget it. But speaking of breakups, this is a breakup song. And this is Should Been Raining. Lantern swaying in a slow breeze. And a cloud in the sky, buzzing off the ground when the house been playing. You look wonderful tonight, and if the stars weren't shining so bright, baby, I'd have seen goodbye in your eyes. Love don't deserve to die on a night like tonight. It should have been right. So fucking we wanna be sad. Baby, don't go, don't leave me all the time, big young. Say yeah, that's all my love's gotta be bad. Oh, no, it should have been rain.
That's awesome. Good job. I will say it's like, I wish that for the people listening, of course, we're doing Zoom audio through internet, so it doesn't give you the and that's I hate that part. But I want to encourage people to find you and Spotify or any of the Apple, or any of the music, streaming website. You're definitely somebody worth following and listening to. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, that means a lot. It really does. And I'm hoping that, that there can be a way where we can work together in the future, possibly, whenever we come into Nashville and all those things. And, I'd like to have a concert here. Maybe we can get you to come back home for a little bit too. So
do stuff like that.
I want to make sure. I want to make sure that, people can we talked about the music and where they can find you. Is there any other place that they can go and find out more information about you and your music?
Yeah, I've got a website. It's emilyelginmusic.com, and it's got my tour dates and just information about me, my merch, and I've got some t-shirts I'll be adding and things like that. And all of social media, I've got YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of the major platforms.
Yeah.
But I did want to tell you that I feel grateful for you asking me to be here, and I love what you guys are doing. And the suicide prevention, I think, is so important. I've got 2 family members in my family that died from suicide, so I think that your work that you're doing is very impactful and it's very important.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to find a unique way of doing it, and it's hard because there's a lot of people out there who are dealing with mental health. I mean, like probably Nashville has it, Oklahoma has it, where Texas has it, where it's 988, to call. And those things are very valuable, but I'm also trying to find it's like, I always think about it like the middle ground. It's like, what about people who are struggling? They're not even to that point yet. They're not to that point. And it's like, I love hearing stories about people that are able to overcome, even in the smallest ways. That's why your story about how you moved from Oklahoma to Nashville is such an inspiration to me, because that's way outside comfort zones. You singing the way I watch your TikToks, and it's funny because, again, we have probably the same amount of followers on TikTok, but the difference is that I rarely turn the camera to me because I'm very maybe insecure about that or whatever. But as you put yourself out there, and you have to. I mean, I get that as an artist, and to be able to even get on here and sing and, but make videos that are vulnerable. There's a lot of your videos where you're being vulnerable, and you're really, this is who I am. And I have a ton of respect for that. And I think that for me, like when I got on TikTok, how many ever years ago, the one thing that I really loved about the platform was that I felt like that you have people being themselves, and that vulnerability is what really attracted people. Now it's kind of shifted in some ways with, shopping and all that stuff. But I think that that's really what people care about. You mentioned Taylor Swift, and Taylor Swift I think that people see a vulnerability in her. They see a relatability. And I think the same thing with you. Whenever I watch your videos, it's like, I think there's a vulnerability and a relatability there. And I think that really inspires people. And, you're doing it. And I want to just encourage you that works, and just be that person to say, hey, even though it's like been in the distance or outside looking in, it's like, man, I think that you're onto something with your vulnerability and honest and just putting yourself out there.
Thank you. Honestly, that means a lot to me, because the reason that I do that is because, number one, like I said earlier, I think mental health is so important. And I feel that the more we talk about it and the more we're open and honest about it, that it's not this big taboo thing, then more people, if they do start to struggle, they will feel better about reaching out. Because I feel like a lot of the reason that people don't reach out is because they're ashamed, they're embarrassed, they don't understand, and all of those things. But whenever I decided to do this, and whenever I decided to get on TikTok and just social media in general, I made, professionally, I made a decision to always be who I am. Because number one, playing a character all the time, all day, every day, it's not sustainable. That's exhausting. Mm-hmm. So, and I wanted my followers and my fans to know who I am as a person before they buy into my music. If you like my music, you like me, and I want that to correlate really well together. I don't want to have to worry about doing something or saying something that's off brand with who I am. Yeah. I am who I am, and I can change that. And I want to be able to have a platform that shows other people. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you've done in your past, the mistakes you've made. If you struggle with anxiety and depression and PTSD and all of these other things, you can still have a successful life with whatever success means to you. It's possible. Like, I did it. You can do it. Anybody can do this.
And I really think you are a great advocate for that. I mean that. That's why I was like, I reached out to you, because I'm like, this girl is being herself. And I think that's sustainable. I really do. And I think it's for kind of this greater good. It really is. It's like, if we are being ourselves and we're being open and vulnerable, it's, the whole stigma thing, it's like, the era of like, let's put on a mask and act like everything's fine and I don't have any struggles and everything's perfect in my world, that I hope it goes away forever. Because I just, in my mind, it's like everybody who I talk to and interact with, I start to see that we're all struggling. We all have problems. We're all, and the ability to support each other in it, even though you can't maybe relate exactly to what they're going through, it's powerful. And I think that your music and your videos and the social media that you put out there does exactly that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Positively Undefeated. If there was something in this show that resonated with you, please share the show with your community. Want this show delivered each Monday morning to your podcast app of choice, please subscribe or follow. And if you'd like to get a hold of Burl, please do so by going to burlstricker.com/contact.